there's different types of creators. There's affiliate creators, there's general influencers, there's what we call CGC or creator generated content creators, which we don't even want them to post. They're just good at content creation. They don't really have an audience and a community, but they're good at content creation. So like there's these different styles of creators. So as when you say what does strategy mean, it doesn't mean what is the talent strategy. It means what's the content strategy. And then how could creators potentially support that content strategy so it's not all on you as a brand to create it all yourself and speak from your own voice.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I wear a bunch of other hats as well. I run a digital-first marketing agency called Did It, which has been around since 1996, so doing SEO since before Google was even founded. So cover a bunch of topics on the E-Marketing Association podcast. So super excited to be chatting with Keith Bendez, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for Linqia, which is in the influencer marketing side of the equation. So let's dive right in. What should folks be doing in the influencer space that they're not doing right now as marketers?
Easy first question. Easy first question. Oh, God. It depends on the brand and many things. The biggest thing probably, and one of the biggest trends we see in the industry right now is just using the content everywhere. I think there's this false perception that creators and influencers are just a social construct, and that's not really true at all. So we're seeing the content used in television commercials and creators used in TV commercials. We're seeing it used in out-of-home ads. We're seeing IRL events and experiences. Some of the most famous creators are going on the road and doing tours, especially podcast creators. So I think the biggest, preconceived or misconceived notion from marketers is that influencer marketing and creator partnerships are a social media post or two with a creator when in reality it could be much, much more than that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think creators are interesting because they bring more than one thing to the table, right? They obviously bring their own reach and their own notoriety or fame to the equation, but their content may outperform any other content in some cases that an agency or in-house team is creating, and you want to be able to boost that and use that in lots of places. And of course, in the wonderful world of LLMs, some of that content that's getting repurposed and reposted may end up getting crawled and have an influence on generative engine optimization and general engine visibility. So there's so many facets about that. How should they, should they make sure that language about reuse is in the contract? And do you feel like there should be different compensation schemes based on the level of reuse for the creator?
Yeah, I would say we don't sign really any contract. It could be the best creator in the world for that brand, and we won't sign the contract if there's no reuse rights. So having access to the content and usage rights over the content is almost an absolute must at this point because so much value comes in the amplification of that content through media or the organic use for the brand. So yes, I'd say if a creator's not including usage rights, we're usually not even interested in partnering with the creator. Now, the creators are smart, they know that, and so the length of that usage is something they are absolutely charging for now, where maybe 5 years ago it just was assumed you would have the rights to this content. Now, every month you want rights to it, there's a cost incurred in that. And obviously, the smaller the creator, maybe the longer the term the rights are versus the larger the creator, they'll really probably charge you for every month, especially when you get into the mega creators. But you need it. You need the rights. I'm not sure why a brand these days would not require usage rights over the content. And again, because we're a big influencer marketing agency and do so many brands, we're signing contracts every day of the week with a lot of creators. So I think I can probably speak for the industry in saying usage is an absolute must.
So yeah, that's a great point. One thing that we've noticed, the Did It team doesn't do a lot of influencer marketing, but and often the budgets for our clients wouldn't allow for anything at the Kardashian level or even remotely like that level. But what we found for some interesting niche level creators is that if they know that there's going to be some boost budget behind their work, that actually ends up being a positive to them because that's going to break them out beyond their typical audience. And so to some extent, they might be a little bit more negotiable and see that as a positive, not necessarily something that they want to get paid extra for, but rather is if they can be sort of guaranteed that they'll get a certain amount of boost energy behind something, they're more willing to negotiate.
Yeah, the exposure for them, if they're smaller, is definitely valuable. And I would say 90+% of the creators we sign contracts with are micro and mid-tier creators, right? The perception that influencer marketing is the Kardashians is completely false. Like I'd put that more as celebrity sponsorship at this point than I would at influencer marketing. So most brands, when they think influencer marketing, it is more about, scaled influencer activations than it is about a spokesperson for the brand. But I agree with you. I think there is exposure benefits. On the other side, I think they are including that as their total value proposition to the brands because there's two reasons you'd work with a creator potentially. One is distribution because you want their audience. The other is content. And increasingly, it's becoming both, if not more, the content side than it is the distribution side because organic reach is hard to come by these days. So creators aren't necessarily separating them out and saying, okay, here's my partnership if you have no usage and here's the cost of usage. They're just assuming content is a part of the value and I'm going to then assign value to that in me partnering with you. But yes, the more media you put on it, if I'm smaller, the more exposure opportunity that is for me as a creator. So that could be viewed as a positive of the relationship.
Great. Yeah. Another trend that I've noticed, and I'd love to get your thought on, it used to be, this myopic view of I'm buying a post and the post includes or buying 5 posts and those are the creatives that I get and I get to use those, blah, blah, blah. But it tends to be sort of very campaign focused and short-term focused. But I've seen a trend more towards longer term relationships that you're building with the creators and where it's more collaborative and it's a deeper relationship. So I'd love to hear what are some of the best practices around that? Because you need the authenticity and sometimes the authenticity builds over time, especially if the creator is not already a fan of the brand, right? So that to get that when you're starting to approach these deals on a more long-term relationship basis, what are some factors that you should take into account?
It's very dependent on the goal of the brand and what they're trying to accomplish. You mentioned before the whole AEO or SEO benefit of influencer. And so if that is a goal, that is a specific type of creator partnership, and you're looking more for content that is searchable and optimized for specific search terms. And so that could be a strategy.
Yeah.
Joining cultural conversations could be a strategy, in which case that you don't necessarily need longer term relationships, but you need people who authentically could speak to that thing happening in culture or that topic of culture. Experts is a trend, so you want experts on your side who make recommendations, and so that you might sign a longer term agreement. So someone could be an expert. But either way, I liken it to a podcast. If you listen to podcasts and a brand sponsors one single episode, the chance of you remembering that brand or that episode is very limited. If the brand sponsors the whole season, you're going to know the brand by the end of the season. And so it's kind of similar with creators where a one-off post, on a random Tuesday when they're posting multiple times every day might be forgotten versus if you consistently stay with that creator, you become a part of their community and audience. And that's what a lot of brands are after. Now, how you do that can come to life a lot of different ways. The whole episodic series trend is big right now, where you take some of these big creators like Chicken Shop Date Amelia, and she's doing all these offshoots with Converse and other brands. So episodic content is big. You could just do ongoing content series, like content throughout, just like you said, instead of one post, there's 20 posts over there, whatever. You saw SoFi the other day announce that they were making Vivian Chu a chief something, giving her a C-suite title at the brand. And they've been doing content with her for 5 years, but now I assume she's getting some kind of either equity or more incentive to not just create content, but have the brand SoFi be successful and her benefit from it. So there's no right or wrong tactical way of doing it. But the podcast analogy, I think, is a good one because it gets people to understand, yes, a one-off post on a Wednesday might not actually just capture their audience's full attention and loyalty to you as a brand.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the episodic, the rise of episodic content, because that to me leaves more room for really interesting collabs, right? Between influencers that where the brand almost becomes a catalyst to allow for multiple people to co-create within that episodic, umbrella. Anything that comes to mind, either from your clients or that you've seen out there, where the people have really been able to use that episodic nature to leverage the reach of multiple creators because they're collabing within that episodic framework.
Well, some brands are doing episodic themselves, like built the finance app, did Roomies, and it's a whole series. And so the premise of the product is it's connected to renting, and so having a show about people renting an apartment together made a lot of sense. So that
Sure.
wasn't necessarily a creator partnership; they started a series. Same thing we saw that with InStyle, and they did their series, The Intern. We've seen it with Mohawk Chevrolet, which was one Chevrolet dealership that did their own series. So like brands are creating their own series, or the Amelia example with Chicken Shop Date and Converse is more the example of you find a creator who has a series and then doing offshoots with them.
Yeah.
We've seen that with the Subway Takes guy doing offshoots of his series. So both are becoming popular. And I think it's good because it's the next level of product integration. So in, television, they'll sell the spot. It's the car company. There's a car scene. Let's put your brand in it, right? And this is
Yeah.
product placement. This almost becomes the ultimate product placement because it's co-creation, to your point. So it's not just, hey, I'm using a card. Do you want to be the card? Hey, I'm going to do do you want to do a series together that details kind of like almost like comedians in cars getting coffee? Like, let's do a whole thing together and I'll customize the whole thing. We'll work on the narrative. We'll work on the guest work. You're co-creating as product placement, which is so valuable versus being kind of the afterthought plug-in for a narrative that already exists. So I love episodic. I think it's definitely a big trend. But I will say you still see the vast majority of influencer marketing going towards sponsored posts. It's not always one off. If you were the creator, Kevin, and I was the brand, I might say, let's do 6, 5, 3, 7, whatever posts together over a period of time. But that is still the most common style of partnership.
So you've got, strategy in your title. So everything you've been discussing is strategy first, right? So when you first meet with a prospect or a client and, they haven't necessarily taken the time to think strategically about the influencer market and the creator market and how it fits into their broader business KPIs, how do you sort of set the table for them and have them take that step back, take a deep breath and think strategically?
A lot of it is not influencer, it's content, and then influencer comes after. So if you were coming to me and you said, hey, I've got, Kevin's Cupcakes, a new cupcake brand I'm launching, or that is in market, I want to talk to you about content. So there's like, what does the brand stand for? What is your differentiator? What's your ethos? And then it's okay. So in content, broadly speaking, there's different things you could do, right? There are campaigns you can run as Kevin Cupcakes. Like you start a campaign, you try to create a brand moment. That might be a path we take, and influencers would support that. You might just try to be part of everyday cupcake and snacking culture, and like we want creators just joining trends and participating in conversations. We just might need good people who are food creators and dessert creators and baking creators to just recommend your product. They just like it. It's just a recommendation. It's a testimonial to your brand. So there's all these different facets to what your content needs are. It's about finding your hook and your voice and then tapping into that. So, I spent many years at Unilever. We had the Dove Self-Esteem Project. There was one big campaign every year or two that supported that, but all year round, the Real Beauty campaign, which was tied to self-esteem, like Dove Real Beauty had an ethos, a theme, and we would constantly do things associated with that. So it really is just what makes this brand different? What is the voice they're trying to communicate? And then we could design a creator strategy around that. Because creators are also, there's different types of creators. There's affiliate creators, there's general influencers, there's what we call CGC, or creator generated content creators, which we don't even want them to post. They're just good at content creation. They don't really have an audience and a community, but they're good at content creation. So like there's these different styles of creators. So as when you say what does strategy mean, it doesn't mean what is the talent strategy. It means what's the content strategy, and then how could creators potentially support that content strategy so it's not all on you as a brand to create it all yourself and speak from your own voice.
Great advice there for sure. Sometimes brand managers, particularly those of a certain age, still come from this concept of command and control, right? Which is what's the script and exactly what is the message. Whereas a lot of the really best stuff we come out of the creator and influencer community is where, you let the creator take, the sort of mission of the content, and they sort of do their own take on it, right? And
Yeah.
so when you're chatting with a client who maybe hasn't quite fully embraced, giving up the control, what's a great way to walk them, comfortably into that area?
It's the biggest hurdle, right? In the creator economy, you see the more brands are specific about the exact creative direction they want a creator to go in, the worse the output is
Of
because
course.
now we call it content to feed match. If the content they produce for you doesn't fit their feed, it's going to be a poor performing piece of content. And the more
Yeah.
you script it, the worse it's going to perform. So to answer your question, how do you get the partners there? A lot of times it's you could do both, but do them differently. So
Okay.
I'll give you two examples. One is you partner with Kevin, you're the creator. I partner with you and I say, Kevin, can you do two things with me? One, this is my brand. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. Create a really good post that you think is amazing for your audience and you think resonates perfectly. And you're going to post that. As a second deliverable, you don't have to post it, but can you do something a little more prescriptive? And I really need you to hit certain key points, still do it in your voice and your style, but like I'm going to be a little bit more prescriptive because I'm going to use that content on my product detail pages or in my paid media. And I do need to hit points a little bit harder.
Right.
And you'll probably say, that's fantastic. I can
Yeah.
post to my audience what I like, and I can give you something that you like that's more branded. That's scenario one. Scenario two is just Kevin, you satisfy the first, and I find someone else to satisfy the second because you might not be the right person to do that second piece of content. So, what I usually tell brands is do both. If you're only going to do the second one, then let's not worry about engagement or any performance metrics on social. You're really just trying to get content for your channels.
That's great advice because then you get your win-win for everybody. Um,
Totally.
let's talk about how you approach creators differently depending on which channel they're big in, right? So you've got the TikTokers, and the fact that the TikTok algorithm is a meritocracy on a post by post basis more than
Yeah.
anything. And then you've got YouTubers where it's more about their subscribers, and the content still has to flow to the top in a meritocracy kind of way, but not in the same way as TikTok. So when you look at two identical influencers from a follower count perspective, right, it's going to be different how you manifest that strategy into what you do for them. So how should brands and folks in your role think that through? Like, okay, you got Instagrammers, your TikTokers, your YouTubers, right? Maybe even people big on X, who knows, right? And you're now trying to figure out how to best use the channel that they're strongest in, or the platform they're strongest in, to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, it's almost because they're all trying to be the same as well and introducing the same features. It's almost the type of post versus the channel. So the big three are TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. In terms of shorts, reels, and TikTok, I think it is more similar than people want to admit. I know you hear a lot of experts being like, create natively for each platform. I think that's kind of BS. I think you can cross post to the different platforms because in an algorithm recommendation ecosystem, which is that short form video, your
Yeah.
mentality is I'm trying to break through and reach people's for you feeds, so to speak. That's
Mm-hmm.
one strategy, right? Then on Instagram, you have another world outside of Reels. You have the story world, you have the wall world, which is more about their audience than it is about getting a reel to hit the feeds of other people. And so that might be a different strategy because now you're more audience focused. And on YouTube, it's similar, but longer form content is very different in how you do partnerships versus shorts content. So you are strategizing differently. So it's almost longer form versus story wall versus short form video, more so than it is TikTok versus YouTube versus Instagram. When you depart the big three, they're very different. LinkedIn is a fast growing platform for influencers. X kind of ebbs and flows a little bit there. Substack is emerging as a legitimate platform. Pinterest is a very different platform. So then you get very different and nuanced opinions for what's right for that platform.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Substack, because this is an area that I've got some stuff I'm working on internally under my nonprofit Giving Forward. But when I was speaking at an influencer conference recently, I had a bunch of conversations about you know, over dependence on a platform and over dependence on the feed, right? And whether or not some of these influencers were building email lists, SMS lists, et cetera. And so you mentioned Substack, and a lot of folks would say, especially if their audience is of a certain demographic, like, yikes, email, like, forget that, right? That's just completely useless. But when you guys look at influencers, and if one influencer says, listen, I've got, 3.6 million followers and I have 250,000 people on my email list, is that a tiebreaker in some cases where they say that's the Substack, right? So like I've got my main channel, but then I do have a push channel which I can run in parallel. Does that end up bringing up strategic implications, or does that end up changing your interest in a particular influencer?
It does. I think most creators, if I'm talking to a creator, I recommend be cross-platform, be multi-channel, and own your audience as much as you can. And so that means, 35 years ago, that meant definitely be TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, all three of them. Now that means definitely add LinkedIn and Substack to that network because you want as much reach as you can get. What I love about Substack is they are, at least right now, kind of removed from the algorithm recommendation engine world where you really do have a following, and that following reliably will see your message every single time you hit publish. Versus on every other platform, virtually, you could hit publish and reach nobody if in the first,
Yeah,
hour it doesn't hit.
yeah,
And so I think that's more of the owning of your audience. For creators, what that means is they are now becoming publishers. Like they
yeah.
are becoming full-blown publishing networks where they have multi-channels, they have different distribution systems. One of the trends I think we're going to see over the next year is kind of what I call the Alex Cooper unwell network effect, which is every creator is going to want to create an entity above their name so that they could even bring other creators in to the empire they're building as a quote unquote publisher. You look at what Darman does with Darman Studios. He's one of the biggest creators in the world, and Dar appears in less than 5% of the content that Darman Studios publishes. So I think it's really, really smart. On the brand side of your question, there's still dependencies of if they have a Substack, that doesn't matter if my whole goal back to the goaling was
Yeah.
video that I could bring to other like, so it still goes to what is the actual point of the brand doing these partnerships at all. But oh my God, if I was a creator, I would not be afraid of Substack. I'd be signing up as fast as you. And I say Substack, but I should say newsletters, right? Because there's a lot of companies that do it very well. Substack is not the only one. Beehive is another great one for creators, but yes, I think newsletters is almost a mandatory right now for creators to go own your audience somewhere.
Interesting. So do you feel like that's despite the fact that they might have a 16 to 25 demo of their typical follower?
Yeah, I think based on the data, I think it's a misconception that younger audiences don't read anything and that they just watch video and have no attention spans. Like I think if you look at the actual data, people are skewing back to the written word, number one. And number two is these platforms are not just written word. I could do video publishing through Substack every single week if I didn't want to do any written word. It's more about the reliability of what I post reaching the audience that actually wants to follow me, because on social, if you follow somebody, that doesn't really mean you get to see their content every time they post content
For
these
sure.
days. And for many people, that is what they want. They want to
Yeah.
stay in tune with the people that they're following. So, one, I think written word is underappreciated for younger generations, and number two is Substack, Beehive. These are not just written word platforms; they have plenty of video capabilities as well.
Great. So what else should brands be thinking about as they sort of plan out their next year's worth of marketing? Again, because influencers are as much a creative asset as they are a distribution arm, right?
Totally.
How should they be thinking that through um, in sort of the rapidly changing landscape? I mean, obviously, that has implications from an AI perspective. It has implications from a, changing algorithm perspective. But, what are some things you would recommend?
I think it's focusing on what is it going to take to increase spend rates in this channel if you believe this channel is the right channel. So back to your Kevin's Cupcake startup, it's funny how when you have very little money and have to be hyper efficient, I'm going to bet if we did a strategy session for a couple hours, you would come to the conclusion that I don't have a lot of money. God, I really just have to focus almost entirely on influencers. How the hell else am I going to get the word out on this brand? Everything is pay to play in this world. I mean, no one's going to follow Kevin's Cupcakes right off the bat. Like, I'm probably just going to have to focus on getting third parties to talk about it. But then when you have all this money at big brands, influencers still 5-10% of the budget spend. So I think asking why, what should it be, and then what would you need to do to get it there is the biggest thing. And so I spend a lot of time with big companies talking about MMM models and deeper media tests on the split sell side for like media assets to understand why is this channel not the bulwark of our investment and what would it take if we believe inherently it should be.
Yeah,
But every big brand is the tree falls in the forest conundrum of if the data doesn't show it, I can't do anything about it, even if I know it to be true. What do we need to do to get the right reads to show the reality of the situation? So I'd spend a lot of time on, in the framework of my company, what is the data set that I need to be showing to validate this channel?
yeah, I love that move to sort of KPIs and the fact that KPIs are going to be very different depending on the strategy you started with. But at the same time, depending on the size of the brand, the bigger brands can do a media mix model, right? They can do it in a
Yeah.
variety of different ways. They can do it longitudinally, they can do it by geography, et cetera. And despite the fact that the coupon code may not make its way all the way through to the thank you page, et cetera, right? You still, at a certain level of scale, you can still demonstrate that you're moving the needle, somewhere in the funnel along the way. But for medium-sized and smaller brands like the Kevin's Cupcakes, right? I certainly can't run a media mix model against any influencer work that I'm doing or other media that I'm buying. How should those folks who are growing brands and don't have that depth of data from a data pool perspective, how should they feel confident that the money is being well spent,
Yeah.
in their creator programs?
I mean, the smallest, the Kevin's Cupcakes example, it's easy because you'll just see it. I mean, you'll just see
Right.
immediate impact because you don't have that many channels and dollars being spent where you don't know what's driving good or bad, right? You might have a single creator be responsible for a jolt in your sales because it's so small. In that medium-sized business era, a lot of it is just paid media efficiency and effectiveness because they are running paid dollars every month, primarily through these social platforms because they're trying to do lower funnel conversion. And what they're realizing is when they actually use creator content in those buys, the effectiveness and efficiency skyrockets. And so then they just have to decide how much do I put to the content part of that budget, which is not the media part of the budget, to get the creators to get me that content. And at what frequency, because of fatigue and media optimization, do I need that content? And so we spend a lot of time on just media split cell tests to understand how is creator content performing against brand content. And if you're spending 50x on media versus creator as an investment ratio, well, then that is a really good spend to make your 50x much more productive for you as a brand.
For sure. Yeah, one of the other things I like about creator generated content is I see huge underinvestment in creative in general across brands. And in social in particular, creative burnout happens pretty quickly against the high consumer of that content, right? They tend to hit the impression caps pretty quickly. And so you have to be rotating in fresh
Yeah.
creative. And it's sort of impossible for a traditional agency model to keep up with that, right? Whereas if you have a pool of trusted creators that you can lean on from that perspective, and their creative tends to work, it really opens up that ability to get the right message to the right audience at the right time, by leaning on them as your creative team.
Totally. Totally. 100%. And so that's really a lot of creator also is the message testing of what you're saying to say, hey, there's a lot of different types of personas out there for creators. Kevin's Cupcakes, you could work with a baking creator. You could just work with a parenting creator. You could work with a foodie creator. You could work with an athletic creator if it's a healthy cupcake. Like there's so many personas you could work with. So some of this is, well, which ones are doing really good work for me and which ones are most effective? Then there's the core message of what they're saying. There's a taste message. There's a calorie message. There's all kinds of messages that you can test, and then there's the audiences that you deliver that message to. So a lot of what creators, I was on the brand side for many years, and we spent a lot of money sitting behind one-way glass, asking questions of a group of 8 people, and then making decisions on millions of dollars. This is real-time insight in the market with real reactions to consumers, and you could be testing so many different things pretty quickly and pretty efficiently to understand, okay, as Kevin's Cupcakes, we got to double down on the protein message of these cupcakes or whatever the hell it is, because that's the message that's resonating and it's best coming from these kind of healthy lifestyle creators. Wonderful. Let's focus a lot of money and attention in that direction.
Great. Yeah, I love the fact that the cream rises to the top in all these tests that you would run. So, any final words to folks who may be struggling with this because their agency doesn't get it or because they're trying to do it internally?
I know what to ask and know what you want. I think half of the issue when brands aren't executing well could be a partner. It could be a partner thing, but more common, it's you don't really know what you want and you're not tailoring it for that. There's a great meme if you watched the David Beckham documentary. Where she walks in the room, his wife, and she said, and they change the text, but it says, "What do you want to accomplish?" David says, and she says, "Awareness." And he says, "What do you really want to accomplish?" She says, "Awareness." He says, "What do you really want to accomplish?" And she says, "Sales." And that I always use that meme because that's a very common thing with marketers, where if you're trying to optimize for awareness or perception or intent or sales, the creators you work with should be totally different. The message you brief them on should be totally different. The way you measure results should be totally different. So if you say it's about one thing and it's really about another thing, you're on a bad path. Just know what you want to accomplish and be obsessive about finding the talent, finding the type of content that could get you to that goal. So just be honest. Be honest about what you want. You could have many goals. You can only have one North Star. What is the North Star?
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom. A lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah, great question. Appreciate it, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.